Hello and welcome. You're listening to Nature's a Hoot with Tom Morath and Hannah Shaw, the wildlife podcast from the Conservancy Trust.
If you are itching to know more about biodiversity or barn owls, or eager to explore the worlds of woodlands and wetlands, basically, if you like wildlife, you're in good company.
And you don't need to be an expert. We've got that covered as we're joined by some of the greatest voices in conservation to tell us more about what's happening right now in the wild world around us. And Hannah, we're kicking off this new season of episodes in style with a special guest, Lucy Hodgson, aka Lucy Lapwing.
Yes, and we have a brand new feature to add to the show, which I'm really excited about, and you'll be hearing more about this shortly. We're so pleased to be welcoming you back after a little break from the show. We especially love the chance to bring you that special episode last month.
Yeah, and if you haven't had a chance to listen to that yet, check it out wherever you get your podcasts, as it was full of inspirational messages from you, our wonderful listeners, about what it is about nature that inspires you. Hannah, what about Nature's a Hoot Live? How fun was that?
It was amazing. I thought it went so well. Did you, Tom?
I was very pleased. I was nervous to begin with because the great thing about doing a podcast is you can just take the stuff out that makes you sound like a complete idiot. But when it's live, and that's it.
Yeah, first time doing a proper live event for me. You have a lot of practice, I feel, because you do your commentating. So a bit different for me because, so I've done some public speaking, but when you've got a camera in front of you as well, I feel like it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and no idea how many people are watching at any given time. Like, at least when we're doing our displays here at the Trust, you can see who's watching you. You can kind of interact. But that's strange experience, but really, really exciting. And it was great to let everybody have a look at our Kestrel documentary.
Yeah.
If you haven't actually managed to see our Nature's a Hoot live, then you can do so on our YouTube channel. Just head over to our YouTube channel and find Nature's a Hoot live. It'll be there. You can watch along and you can see what we were getting up to with our Kestrel Special.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a brilliant documentary. I really enjoyed doing the live event. So, Tom, have you spotted any good wildlife recently? Anything to report in the last month or so?
Well, spring is kind of springing, isn't it? So, just wandering around the grounds here, we've got snowdrops. We've got snowdrops springing up everywhere, and things are starting to bud. I had the nicest experience when I was on a walk very recently, because a pair of ravens flew very low over my head. They were flying away from a group of crows, so I have half a sneaky suspicion that they're either pinching food or maybe raiding a nest or something. But I have to say, I know birds of prey are kind of our thing. That's what we do. But ravens have got a special soft spot in my heart. I think they're incredible.
Yeah.
It's that intelligence, and just behind the eyes, the cogs always look like they're turning.
Yeah, I love watching corvids as well. I think they're so interesting because they are just so intelligent. I don't think people realise how clever they are. I think they just, sort of pass it off, it's just a crow. But they are very intelligent birds. I'd like to learn more about them. I think I need to maybe read up a little bit on corvids.
I got a book for Christmas because they're like my favourite bird. I did get a book for Christmas that you can borrow if you want to. Have you seen anything of note as spring is just around the corner?
Yeah. I've seen lots of snowdrops, which is lovely. I do like going and looking at trees at this time of year because they're all starting to come into bud, and it is quite a nice time of year to start learning stuff as well. So it's a nice time of year to start learning bird song because there aren't too many birds going mad, so you can sort of pick out different species. But it's also a good time to start learning trees because trees are in bud. You can identify species from their buds. So often you find in a field guide, it's a nice way to sort of find out about trees and work on your ID. I did find a really nice pine cone the other day from a Monterey pine, which is one that is a species which is it's not native, so it was grown as like an ornamental species, but it's a big pine, and the pine cones itself are massive, they're like the size of your fist.
Wow.
And I was just really pleased with myself for being able to identify the tree from the pine cone.
Yeah. So Hannah, question is, did you take it home or did you leave it where it was?
Well, you see, it's a little bit naughty, isn't it? But I thought about it, and I knew it wasn't native because it was ginormous, so I did take one home, yeah.
Yeah. We've all got our little collections of wild stuff, nature stuff.
Yeah. There were lots and lots on the ground, and I looked through, I was very carefully picking them up because a lot of them had like wood lice and things living underneath, so I was careful to replace the ones that had anything living underneath. And made sure I took one that wasn't providing a home for anything.
Good. You've been very ethical there with your choices for what to take home. Now, Hannah, this month we're introducing a new element to Nature to Hoot. Isn't that exciting?
Yes.
It's called the Matter of Fact Challenge. This is a challenge that involves you and I, Hannah, going head to head each month to come up with the best fact in the chosen category.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh, yes. And we'll be giving you, our listeners, our best. And as a matter of fact, we'll be popping them up on our Instagram stories and on our Twitter as a poll. And then it's up to you, our wonderful listeners, to decide the victor. Let's go into our very first Matter of Fact Challenge. This month's Matter of Fact Challenge is Weirdest Animal Adaptation.
So I'm going to go first, Tom.
Of course.
And I challenge you to beat this one.
Go on then.
Mine is the wood frog. The reason that I've chosen the wood frog is because this species of frog has adapted to very cold climates. And you wouldn't expect an amphibian to be very well adapted to a cold climate. So what a wood frog does is during the winter, it actually can completely freeze its body. And during this time, they completely stop breathing, their heart stops beating, and their bodies produce a special substance that stops their cells from completely freezing, because then they would die. And they basically, so they look like they're completely frozen.
Wow.
But then when the weather warms up, they thaw out like when you're thawing out your chicken on the on the sideboard. They thaw out and come back to life. Well, they haven't actually died, but so they reanimate, if you will.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So they're found in, just a bit of background so people know what we're talking about. They're found in the United States. So in the forests of Alaska and the northeast of the US, or northeast of the Americas. So you can have a look online and find wood frogs and look at some pictures of frozen wood frogs.
That is amazing. It's going to take some beating, Hannah. A frog that can freeze itself over winter and come back to life.
Right, so what is yours?
Mine, we're going to go avian for the first week. I'm going to try and branch out into other parts of the animal kingdom eventually.
Yeah.
But we're going to go avian. We're going to go across to southern Africa. Red-billed hornbill or yellow-billed hornbills. In particular, they have this weird nesting habit, and you might know what I'm going to say here.
I think I do know, yeah.
If you're lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time in South Africa, you can observe how these birds build their nests and how they lay their eggs, and then how their youngsters eventually fledge. Now, essentially, yellow-billed hornbills, red-billed hornbills, they're a monogamous species, so they'll usually just pair up with one other partner, but then they'll pick another partner the following year. So they kind of come back to the same place, but maybe have another partner. They call to each other and they start building a nest in a tree cavity, so a nice hole in a tree. And the next step is totally bizarre. It is like the weirdest adaptation, I think, and that is that the male and female work together, picking up bits of mud and loose feathers and occasionally some of their own poo to essentially brick the female into the tree, like build a wall of mud up the side of the tree so that she can't get out, basically. She's stuck on the inside of the tree in order to incubate the eggs and, of course, lay the eggs in the first place. Now, they leave a tiny little slit in the side of the tree where the male can continue to feed the female, keep her alive. The female molts all of her flight feathers, and it's not until about 25 days after the first egg has been laid that the eggs will start hatching. The female continues to feed them, and around 16 days after hatching, the female will finally break out of the hole. So she spends the best part of a month sealed inside a tree.
Wow.
Yeah.
Completely imprisoned.
Completely imprisoned. Some people say that it is a way of reducing predation. It's harder for predators to get inside to try and take the eggs or the youngsters. There's often a lot of competition for nesting sites as well. So if you're sealed inside the tree, it's kind of less appealing to come and try and take it over. I think that is a pretty weird adaptation, to seal your partner inside a tree.
Wow, that is a good one, Tom. I must say, I'm impressed.
Thank you. Are you worried now?
I'm a little bit worried, but no, I think that the wood frog will power on through.
All right, fair enough.
Okay, remember, it's up to you, wherever and however you're listening to Nature's a Hoot, to vote for which fact you think best fits the bill of weirdest animal adaptation. Not favourite presenter.
Of course not. So,
best weirdest animal adaptation.
Absolutely, it's nothing to do with favouritism whatsoever. So head over to our Instagram stories or our Twitter feed, both at Hoot Conservancy, to vote.
We will be revealing the winner of this episode's Matter of Fact Challenge next time.
Thanks for playing.
So this month we have a special guest joining us, Lucy Hodgson, better known online as Lucy Lapwing. And Lucy is a naturalist, conservationist and self-proclaimed all-round nature nerd.
Lucy works in science communication, making those tricky sciencey subjects a little bit more accessible via social media, and more recently, her own series of birdsong videos on YouTube. Lucy joined us hot off the back of filming the latest series of Winter Watch to talk nature, birdsong and eco-dread. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Lucy Lapwing, or is it Lucy Hodgson? What should we call you?
Ooh, bit of both. Lucy Lapwing is just my online persona. I wish it was my real name. So.
It's like an alter ego.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here. Yes, different personality.
Yeah.
It used to be Lucy Lamp Lady off of Alphabet Land. I don't know if any of you remember that.
Alphabet Land, yeah. In the recesses of my brain. Yeah. Annie Apple.
Yeah. Annie Apple. Yes, yeah. Bouncy bed.
Excellent.
And so it used to be Lucy Lamp Lady when it was just photos of me, like on the beers on a night out. And then when I started actually writing about nature and getting a bit more of a, an interest in that, I thought, well, this needs to be a bit more nature related. So Lapwing begins with L, and that's about as deep as it goes.
Just purely for the alliteration.
Yeah, literally.
So was the wildlife thing, did that come kind of later in life for you then, or is it something that you've always loved?
It's something I've always loved, and I say this quite a lot, but I, hand on my heart, believe that every single kid has it in them. Like if you've got a toddler or a baby that's not been tainted, every single one will naturally love nature. If you put a kid in, I don't know, a mud pit or in the garden, they see a frog, they see a worm, they see a snail, they are instantly naturally fascinated. And unfortunately, a lot of people lose it. So for as long as I can remember, it was just a fixation with anything living, any wildlife, anything. I didn't have a knowledge. I knew a lot from the books I had as a kid. So I could tell you all sorts about like whales and dolphins and things from far-flung corners of the world. But I didn't have a lot of British nature knowledge until... Well, I went and studied wildlife conservation at uni, so I was obviously into it, but I didn't actually have any. Didn't actually have any natural history knowledge until I kind of started working in conservation, really. So, yeah.
No, it's nice that it really is quite a natural thing, isn't it, to be fascinated. I mean, we're in more normal times. We're lucky to have lots of school visiting parties come to us, and we do things like owl pellet dissections, and it's all that when you tell them what's in an owl pellet. It's all the kids are like absolutely fascinated, think it's going to be great. And it's all the teachers that are like repulsed by it. They've obviously grown out of being fascinated more than they are.
It's so easy. It's a slippery slope of kind of disgust and fear, and, it perpetuates itself. So if you start getting scared of one thing, it can drift into another. And, like you said, if you've not been told to be fearful of something, why wouldn't owl pellets be the best thing you've ever seen? Like, they're brilliant.
Why not?
Did you always think that you would work with wildlife as well? Did you always think you wanted to work in conservation, or was that something that came later? So you're obviously very passionate about it.
Yes, perhaps a bit too much. I always wanted to work with animals, as a kid. So I'm not from a wildlifey background, as it were. But my parents let me have a really outdoorsy childhood. So all I knew was just animals are the best thing ever. So when you're a kid and you say that, you get kind of channeled into like being a vet or any of those kind of jobs. And it wasn't until I was an older, like perhaps 12, that I heard of this concept of conservation, and I was like, wait, what? This is a thing. So yeah, my careers advice at school was absolutely shocking. I'm sure a lot of people can relate.
Mine was the same.
I was recommended to be a florist or a dog groomer. So yeah.
There's like as close. That's sometimes when I look up like car insurance and it says, what is your job? And sometimes things like that are the closest thing. I think sometimes it comes up zookeeper, but it's like the closest, like you say, dog groomer or something like that.
Yes, which is definitely not what you're doing.
No.
Yeah, or you could work in a pet shop.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I do remember those actually. They said, what do you fancy doing? I said, well, I really, really like birds of prey and I reckon that's what I'm going to do. And I remember the person doing giving us the advice just kind of closed their book and went, well, that sounds like you've got a good going on there. Off you go, So I didn't really have anything to say to that. Just carry on.
It's such a little known thing, is it? They wouldn't know what to recommend you if you say you want to work with birds of prey. They don't know what kind of A-levels or degree might benefit that.
No, probably none of them. Most of them are completely useless.
Exactly. Vast majority of people don't understand wildlife and nature anyway, so they can't really advise you on a route often, is what I've found anyway.
Definitely. So I know you've been really, really busy. At the time of talking to you, you're kind of hot off of the back of doing Winter Watch, aren't you? You're still working on that.
Yes.
How was that?
Oh, that's just like a dream come true. I'm still such a fangirl about it. So it's only the second show I've worked on. I worked on Spring Watch in 2020, which was obviously very unusual. And then this time I was in Wales with the Yolo's team. Yolo's lovely team, being a runner. So basically putting my hand to anything they asked me to. And yeah, it was just brilliant. It's such an amazing program. It really showcases British telly, prides itself on accuracy and the nerdiness of it, and like celebrates the nerdy side. What I'm all about. So yeah, it's brilliant show.
Yeah, I saw from your social media, you're kind of like an artist as well, aren't you? So some of the things that we saw on screen were made by you backstage. Is that right?
Yes, that's the dream come true. Prop making. I wouldn't say I'm an artist. I just kind of like arts and crafts. It was the first time I touched paints in years, so it was a bit of a journey. But yeah, that's I've admired the props are like semi-humorous and like just brilliant. So yeah, it was great to have a go at that.
Yeah, no, they look fantastic. Good enough to be on prime time anyway, obviously.
Yes.
So we often talk quite a lot about, and I think this came through on Spring Watch as well, with was it mindfulness minute?
Yes.
Oh yeah, the mindfulness minute.
Yeah, I think that kind of came through the kind of great need for this link with nature and well-being and us kind of feeling better. I know that in the past you've talked about kind of advocating for nature therapy, all that sort of stuff. Have you kind of found that useful yourself, like throughout life or in lockdown?
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's I know to so many people it sounds so airy-fairy and so, wishy-washy, non-scientific, kind of magic hippie type stuff. And as somebody, I operate often on like a sense of humor and silliness. So, it doesn't tend to go naturally with that to talk about like, the beauty and the serenity. But connecting with nature is the best thing for your head in the world. And, there's a lot of science behind it, proper science, like real science. And you're often in, if you think of like on a daily basis, we're in the vast majority of the time in modern human civilization, we're in kind of fight response, fight or flight. Like we are, we're reacting, we're busy, we're stressed, we're thinking, we're processing stuff, we're doing stuff all the time, we're, stressing about things or working. We're never taking that moment of just mindless tasks that we would have had to do as a species, finding food and that kind of thing. So when you're in nature and you're just observing something, you just go into a different mindset. I have mental stresses the same as anyone, but I had a period of physical ill health a few years ago, and nature is the thing that just completely got me through it. It's just brilliant. Yeah,
I've seen on something that you said about advocating for green prescriptions as well.
Yes, yeah. So that kind of falls hand in hand with the need to, I think, for more people to just even know that nature's a thing for them to have a look at. So, green prescription is a term for prescribing somebody time in nature or observing nature or in a green space, outdoors, basically. And people need to be told how to do it because it's not part of our daily lives. It's not, you know, you're not raised to be shown how to observe nature, how to find it. You know, if you've not got people to ask, how do you start the process of bird watching and learning it? It just seems really alien. So yeah, green prescriptions are, I think a really good thing to do.
It is difficult because, like you said earlier, people have that as like an innate thing from when they're little, but then you lose it because you get just drawn into the humdrum of life, basically, and people don't find time for it. So it's you're totally right that people need to be shown how to do it, and it's really, really valuable. We're working on some stuff at the Hawk Conservancy Trust where we can show how like proximity to our birds and just spending time with them is really, really good for your well-being, and it's definitely something that is so valuable, and it's right there, and it could be used in such a wonderful way, but it's really not used as much as it could be.
I totally agree. You can see now, you know, with some kids that you talk to, just how alien the concept of it is. You know, we live in such a fearful society, and, you know, kids who can't regularly climb trees or, you know, see these things, and you know, a lot of it comes from a place of fear, and the fear comes from a lack of understanding and education. But you know, people will laugh at you and say it's geeky and nerdy and gross and weird, but everyone gets, there's a species that will get everyone excited. You know, everyone's got something in the world that'll tickle their fancy, like, and it's often things like tigers, dolphins, elephants, you know, all the big sexy stuff. But things like birds of prey, people don't know what we've got. People think all birds are brown and they're all about this big and they're all over there. But the way that you guys can show something with those eyes and the claws and the beak and the fact that we have those species here in the UK, it's like, that's mind blowing to a lot of people. You know, people don't notice until it's literally shown, and you're like, oh my god.
That has actually shown when we do work with some of the birds, people are also very excited to tell you when they have had that wild experience with those animals. So barn owl is a great example. A barn owl is going to be a bird that chances are, if you're going to see an owl, it's probably going to be a barn owl in Britain, isn't it? When you're driving home from work or when you're going for a walk through the fields, and people are so excited to say, I've seen this, you know. So there is an appetite for it. You've just got to kind of reawaken that part of people's brain, haven't you?
Absolutely. And it's, you know, when you start creating a mental habit of it, you kind of then start mentally needing it, and you seek it out. Like, I just have to have nature time. There's no word for it, which is really annoying, but like nature time, I need it, or I just
need to invent a word for that.
There does. There needs to be.
So I know obviously a big part of getting people excited about nature is kind of just communicating about it. As you were saying, there's no way people are going to love things and care for things if they don't know anything about it. What, in your kind of experience when you've done this kind of communication work, what are the things that excite people? What sort of things are you telling them to try and hook that interest for then kind of expand on that later?
I think there's anything and everything, because what you tend to find, like, I try to be accurate, like scientifically, and I try to you know, look at the detail and get things correct when I'm talking about it. But also, the language in the world of science is so inaccessible to most people in terms of understanding it. So it's like, how do you translate it? And what I find really interesting is this kind of air of professionality that everybody has to have all the time. You know, we have to be really serious and straight-faced, and, you know, we're talking about declines of nature here. We can't, you know, be silly. But, you know, it's not natural for humans. And I think you can be professional and be very silly and informal with it at the same time. So if you can translate anything about an animal, whether it's behavior, whether it's its ecology, whether it's, you know, some of the stuff that surprised me is some of what I think is right at the nerdy end of the spectrum that I wouldn't think would, you know, really go off on people. You tend to find the sexy species, again, if I post a hedgehog, or, you know, people go, ooh, but
it's cute. Like
leaf miners. I posted about leaf miners recently, and that's one of the most popular things I've ever done. And it's like a minuscule moth that's larvae lives inside the two membranes of a leaf, but people, you know, they absolutely just went mad for it. They loved it because it's visually beautiful, and it's something you've perhaps overlooked, and you can go to any old park at the end of the street and find them. So it's, you know, it's really accessible. and just describing it, not in a way that's loads of Latin names and,
Yeah.
words like larvae and pupae. And I think, just translating it helps.
I think sometimes what's helped people that I've spoken to is also just being kind of humble about things as well. So there is so much to know, isn't there? There's so much that we don't know about things, and as individuals, there's so much that we don't know.
It is why it's the best subject in the world, because you could never, ever, ever, ever stop learning about it.
Yeah.
And like, I'm a generalist naturalist. I go for a bit of everything. I've not got a speciality. Like, birds is probably what I know most about, but even then I still get stuff wrong. And yeah, you can't know everything. Like, people will be a speciality. They might know every single Latin name of every solitary bee species in the UK, but if you ask them about lichen, they'll be like, oh,
what's that?
I like to just dip my fingers in all the pies and just have a little taste, and then just spread love about it all. So yeah, there's so much I don't know. People, if I could take someone out on like a walk, tends to be fungi that people ask me about, and they'll ask me what's that, and I go, I don't know, brown job. It's 15,000 species in the UK. I know like 100. Like.
So you said about birds being the thing that you know the most about. Tell us about your new YouTube series. We've really been enjoying it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I only started learning British bird ID when I was 22, and I got my first job with the RSPB. Inevitably, they suck you in. You get caught up in it. So yeah, like learning as an adult and being surrounded by a lot of people who work in the sector who have known birds since they were this big, because grandma or granddad were into it. It was quite really intimidating, and being like, how am I ever going to learn this? I remember being confused between coal tits and great tits, and being like, how does anybody tell the difference between a buzzard and a kestrel? Which now seems like, how could I ever get that mixed up? But it's good to remember, like you said, when you didn't know. And part of that has been, I tried to immerse myself in teams of people, and I'd go out a lot with lots of volunteers on the nature reserves I worked on. And there's so many people of a certain age, older people in our society, who have so much knowledge and passion for the natural world that is very lacking today. And they're so willing to share it. I'm sure you guys have come across, these people who've just got, it's their everything. And as soon as you ask a question, it's like they just tell you it all. And birdsong was a thing that on my very first day, my very first job with the RSPB, my boss started testing me on birdsong, and I was like, I did not know a single bird. I barely knew birds to look at, let alone sound. But going out with volunteers and people taking the time to teach you these funny little ways of learning it is what's really stuck. And I thought, there's not really a resource online that kind of does that for people. That's like a human way of remembering it. It's all about like descriptions of noises and formal guides, or it's just a video of the bird singing and it says this is a missel thrush, and it's like, yeah, but why is that a missel thrush? Like,
yes, I know what you mean actually.
So
about when I used to read bird books and things, it would give you a kind of
random sound.
Oh, it does. Yeah, let's find one.
It would say something underneath the bird like cheer up, and I think,
yeah,
how does cheer up sound?
This is it. So I've landed on marsh harrier here, mostly silent, but during courtship displays, the adults have a wailing queue call. What's that? That didn't sound like a bird, did it? This one here, jacksnipe. Display flight calls include some sounding like a cantering horse. Collar rap. What does that mean? That's not what a jacksnipe sounds like.
No, anyone who can that's a skill in itself. Someone who can decipher bird calls just through those words.
Through bird books, yeah.
Yeah.
And there is a science to it, there is logic, but it just doesn't work for me.
The tips that you give in your videos are great. I mean, I have to brush up every year on birdsong, and it was even just the differences you gave between the blackbird, the song thrush, and the missel thrush, because they're quite similar. It was so helpful to think, of course, the blackbird does the big pauses between the little bits of singing that he does, and saying that the missel thrush is a bit of a whinge bag. It's totally true.
I've got one outside my window, and it's just and that's the thing. It's the human funny. It's the funny ways of remembering. It's the same thing you use when you're revising for exams. You try and think of just funny, quirky little ways to remember.
So sorry, you were saying like a top tip for trying to remember these was setting them as an alarm or as a ringtone.
Yeah. So I was doing bird surveys in Sherwood Forest 2 years ago, and they've got all sorts of things there that I was not used to. So they've got woodlark, tree pipit, red star, marsh tits, spot flycatchers, all things that I was like, I don't know what they sound like. So I'd set them as like my message, like alert tone or alarm. But if you set it as your alarm, be prepared for it to get on your nerves very quickly.
Yeah. Pavlovian response. You're just like, no.
Yeah, when you're out for a walk.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah, I've had curlew as my alarm tone now for like a year. Whenever I hear curlew in real life, it's like, oh my god, I'm suddenly tired.
Needs therapy now just for the get back some love for a curlew. Unfortunately, at this point, the technology let us down. Or maybe it was user error, because somehow we stopped recording the interview. In either case, we now rejoin our conversation with Lucy as she explains her exasperation with the crises that now face the natural world.
You know, so all this stuff I don't need, there's nothing to stop me doing that, and that's Earth's resources. Everyone can do it, and it's encouraged by everyone. And then we can order, you know, we can eat whatever food we want year round. People don't understand issues like pesticides and intensive farming and how that can impact on nature and how it has done. People can demand, you know, mangoes from wherever and strawberries in December and all of this stuff that we're just sold by giant corporations that profit off us consuming, and nobody cares about the outcome for nature. You know, people care about the big species. Again, you know, they'll feel upset at a WWF advert with pandas on it and tigers on it, but, you know, they don't care that moth populations have declined by nearly 70% in the UK. And yeah, this is depressing. Sorry.
No, it's fine. No, I know. I read somewhere that I think it was on your blog about you talk about eco dread, which is kind of sort of merged into kind of eco anxiety now. But I totally get that. You know, sometimes you think, oh, we're trying to do all this stuff. We're trying to talk about it, trying to get people involved, and you kind of feel so small in such a big problem.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Yeah, it feels like holding up an umbrella to a tsunami. It's like,
Yeah.
it's just not going to do anything. I've read some really interesting stuff in the sphere, you know, of the dialogue around eco-anxiety and eco-dread about how hopelessness and despair aren't necessarily the worst things in the world in terms of human emotion. We tend to just, you know, there's this false positivity where people are like, everything's going to be fine. It's like, the reality is it's probably really not. But that hopelessness can be useful because, you know, through that creativity is born. You know, people adapt in the worst, darkest moments and situations. But I do think people are just completely walking into this with no clue of how bad it's going to be. People are just in complete and utter denial. Like, so I am by choice child free because I don't want to bring children into this world. That's how bad I think it's going to be, which is a horrible thing to say, but it's the truth. And I can do that. I can be, you know, pessimistic about the outcomes and think it's going to be really bad, but I can also do everything I can to try and spread joy about wildlife and spread, you know, interest in it and enthuse people and connect people with it. I can do all I can and still think it's going to be inevitably bad in the end.
Yeah.
Just got to try.
I know that you're kind of an advocate for not only getting people to kind of get out there, but also to kind of do their bit to support nature as well.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, help. You know, it might not help in the long run of the overall aim, but we can adapt. We can certainly adapt. I think what frustrates me the most in it, and what I have seen a change in the conversation and the narrative is, you know, we see climate change so much more in the news now than we ever used to. And climate activism is increasing, you know, Greta and all that. Brilliant. There's almost no dialogue around the biodiversity crisis, and that's as big as a threat, if not more so, because the two things are interlinked like that. Yes. And everybody focuses on the climate, and then everybody starts looking at solutions to fix it as part of like the capitalist system that we're in, that is, you know, private businesses, it's technology driven, you know, it's all about like renewable energy or carbon capture or biofuel. You know, the next thing, instead of thinking, why don't we just live a little bit differently? Why don't we flip it on its head? You know, we could live, we have the intelligence, the resources, the technology to live very comfortable, very long lives for the most part for your average, you know, population. And you don't need to consume all of this stuff and live in the way that we're living. You know, there won't be as much luxury. You might not be able to go on holiday 3 times a year. You might not be able to eat whatever you want when you want, but you will always have enough food. You'll have shelter, warmth, comfort, medicine.
Now, this is a question that I know Hannah and I are unable to answer ourselves, so I always think it's a bit cruel to ask you, but I'm going to anyway. Do you have a top wildlife moment? Is there something that sticks in your mind that it's like, that's the thing that I always go back to say, yeah, that was my favourite thing that's ever happened to me in the wild?
You can have multiple.
I have about 20 a year. It changes all the time.
Wow.
Oh, maybe more than that. It can be something really mega and exciting, like I'm trying to think, like seeing a golden eagle or something in Scotland, or it can be the thing that just came to mind. I was watching a giant species of ichneumon wasp laying eggs in a dead birch tree a few months ago. Oh, I spent like an hour watching it. It's just the best. This year I had red-tailed bumblebees under my shed in my garden. That was brilliant. So it can be just really boring stuff that's like really day to day.
But it's special to you.
Yeah, it's when you read about something and then you find it, like a behavior or something. That's when it's like, oh my God, this is so cool.
No, when we in the first episode we did of this podcast, we talked about this. What were our favourite wildlife moments? And I think mine was seeing a badger for the first time, and I was like, "That's pretty cool. Seeing a badger for the first time is amazing." And then Hannah came in with swimming with whale sharks, and I was like, "What? How do you compete with that? Not fair."
Yeah, but I did also say that when I first saw a badger, it was equal to swimming with whale sharks.
You did say that. I'm not
it was like amazing.
Yeah.
But
Fair
swimming
enough.
with whale sharks was good.
Yeah, that's pretty unbeatable. I'll give you that.
Lucy, thank you so much for coming to talk to us.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy.
What's next for you? What have you got going on in the next few weeks and months, if you can plan that far ahead?
Oh, I don't really know. More birdsong stuff. Spring's coming. I get to this time of year, I wish winter away, and then it gets to the start of February and spring starts springing, and then I'm going to miss everything. I'm going to miss the adders. I'm going to miss the snowdrops. I'm going to miss the bluebells. I'm going to miss this. So yeah, I need to see it spring and as much wildlife as possible.
Oh, Hannah, wasn't it great to talk to Lucy? It's amazing to have her here.
Yes, it really was. I really, really enjoyed talking to Lucy. I felt a lot in common with her in terms of how she talked about the time she used to spend when she was a kid, just going out and digging up worms and things like that. I was very similar when I was a child. And it was, although, a little bit sort of saddening to hear, it's nice to sometimes have sort of a realistic outlook from someone about that eco dread. I mean, it is quite scary, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's perfectly normal to feel it as well. Like, it's a big problem and a big challenge, and one that feels insurmountable sometimes. But, ever the optimist, I like to try and think that if it's a problem we have made, surely it's a problem that we can pull together to fix. But I know what you mean. I had a lot in common with Lucy, not least of all learning the letters of the alphabet by Letterland, which I'm sure maybe a few of our listeners will know what Letterland is. Maybe that was just a moment for Lucy and I to bond over primary school English lessons. Who knows? But yeah, Lucy, thank you so much for coming on again. If you want to find out a little bit more about her work, then you can do so. You find her online. Just find her Lucy Lapwing, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And of course, if you put Lucy Lapwing bird songs into YouTube, you'll be able to find her lessons on teaching yourself how to learn what all the bird songs are. With the arrival of March comes the beginning of spring. And as the weather starts to head in a warmer direction, many bird species in the garden or your local area are starting to think about nest building. Our top tip this month is to offer them a helping hand. Try tying together bunches of moss and tiny twigs and hanging them close to your bird feeders to offer the local birds some material to build from. If you have pets, you could even try saving fur from grooming sessions and stuffing it into an old bird feeder, or even clipping it to the washing line. The birds can use the fur to line their nests and help to keep them warm.
So I'm afraid that's it for March. It really does go quickly, doesn't it? How are we at the beginning of March already?
I know, it goes so fast. Now, it's a quick reminder to vote for me. on our Instagram stories and Twitter page, or Hannah if you really must, for our new Matter of Fact challenge. I reckon this one could get quite competitive.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you've enjoyed this episode, there's loads more where this one came from, so don't forget to subscribe and listen back to all our past episodes.
Yeah, if you'd like to know more about anything we've talked about in today's show, then head over to our social media pages where you'll find our blog that accompanies this podcast and loads more besides. Just search Hawk Conservancy Trust on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and YouTube.
So next month we'll be joined by wildlife advocate, writer and fellow podcaster Sophie Pavel to talk all about beavers.
I'll say no more. Can't wait.
See you then.
Bye.